we're going to talk a bit about targeting and hyper-targeting on video. And I thought I'd start things off with an anecdote of a conversation I had about 15 years ago with a very senior person at a very large agency who I was debating whether I'd name or not, and I don't think I will.
Go on.
He's bald and a curmudgeon.
Sounds like me.
You look like a hippie compared to him.
Yeah, right.
He's a bullet head. So we had been working for a year on building an online GRP measurement. And we were going to go after those TV ad dollars by fighting on their turf and measure GRPs and have a trading currency. And this is a large, this was with Yahoo at the time. We've been doing a lot of work. We had engineers working on this. We finally got the meeting with this guy, and we sit down and we said, look, we've developed this whole method of delivering and measuring GRP. He goes, I'm going to stop you. If I want to buy GRP, I'll buy fucking television. What else you got? So based on the fact now that we're talking about hyper-targeting video, has the world completely inverted? Are we talking now about ways that we can hyper-target audiences on video and interactive TV or programmatic TV? So where are we now in the world of targeting on television? Maybe Simon, you could kick us off.
I think just to go back to the Barb thing there. Data has always been there. We're always dealing with data. To say data is new is wrong. It's not. What we're talking about in terms of Barb and Radar and the like versus the data now is we're talking about personalized data. Now, what personalized data does is allow you, which you've talked about, to target individuals precisely where they are. Now, that has its limitations, and its limitations are well spoken about, but in a very broad sense, is it accurate? And at the moment, there are lots of questions around the accuracy of the data that's in the marketplace. Who owns that data? And that has its place as well, because what we've had in the past with the data with Barb, Radar, etc., is actually that data is entirely independent, funded independently, without any influences from the outside as to how that data is collected and put together. A bunch of experts said. What we now have data which is owned by either media owners or agencies or other data sources. Now, what that does is a level of disruption, because what people are trying to do is make money out of that data. Now, if you're trying to make money out of that data, you're going to be biased, because that's what's happening. And so I think first thing we need to have is a central place where all data sits, is independently funded, independent of media owners, independent of agencies, what we all buy into. And then you will get transparent, top quality data. Now, whether that happens or not that's a very long shot. There's also another thing, which is, there's a great human factor, which is that of discovery and serendipity. Now, lots of people talk about ad avoidance, ad blocking, and they blame, I've heard it a million times, oh, it's the creative. Actually, it might be a bit the creative, but it's also the data. Because if you are constantly served your favorite meal every day, it gets a bit annoying. And that's how we're using data at the moment. We're constantly chasing people around and saying, this for you, this for you, this for you, and we've lost the serendipity. Now, what you get with broadcast media is an element of that serendipity, because it's not so targeted. Oh, that's quite interesting. Let me go and look at that a bit more. And I think that actually what you're having in television is in the online area, you'll have close targeting, because online tends to be, I'm talking about online as mobile as well, tends to be consumed by an individual, and therefore is a different sort of consumption from a human aspect. Whereas if you're looking in the linear scape, actually that's consumed by a number of people sitting around the sofa together, and it's a different environment.
Great, thank you. And just because I like to do things backwards, we could all introduce ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I dove right in there with a question. But yeah, Marco, maybe if you could introduce yourself and we'll just come down the line.
Yeah, Marco Bertozzi. I work for Publicis Media. I've got a sort of long background in programmatic. I hope today isn't going to be about programmatic versus TV type discussion. But programmatic and performance, and been in digital since 2000, but importantly before then, 4 years as a TV buyer. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Great. I'm Lindsay Clay. I'm the Chief Executive of ThinkBox. ThinkBox is the marketing body for commercial TV. So we are here to help people, advertisers, agencies, anybody interested, get the best out of the medium. What else? My background, before ThinkBox, my background was creative agencies, so rather than media.
My name is Simon Daglish. I'm actually Deputy MD of Commercial, different title, same job. My background is, before I came here, I worked in MySpace and online for a number of years. Before that, radio, before that, press. So the only medium I haven't done is outdoor.
Oh, there you go.
And my father did
There's
that.
still time.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, let's I think we'll get a chance to look at some of those points you raised with your opening comments there in a little bit. But like to start things out, let's zoom out and talk a little bit about the role of TV in today's modern marketing mix. Where does traditional TV sit? Marco, do you want to take that as an old TV person?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has the role it's always had, which in many cases is to make brands famous. I think sound and visual medium is still the best way of doing that. I think making brands famous is an interesting thing, and I think when we talk about linear TV, which I think we're going to spend this whole panel constantly reminding each other which one we're talking about, but when we're talking about linear TV, I think something's only famous when you go and talk to someone else and they've heard of it too, right? If you just see something on your own, completely in isolation, you don't necessarily know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or a famous thing. So I think TV has always played that role, and that's an incredibly important role. I would be, maybe Lindsay would know, I'm still interested to understand where we start to have this sort of shift from linear TV in the living room to the sort of tablet world. Is an ad more or less powerful viewed as a group, or when you're, quite sort of tunnel vision looking at an iPad on the train? And that's I don't know the answer to that. Maybe someone else does. But so I think, one way or another, that impact of sound and vision is always going to have a massive role in getting brands started. Where I sort of, the only caveat I put to that, and one where, and Lindsay and I will probably refer to it, there was a debate that I was involved in around creativity and technology and how they work together. The only caveat I'd say is that you don't need TV to create a brand, in my view. Like, many of the biggest brands we know today have been created on the back of TV and continue to be, but there are also a number of massive brands that haven't been. So I think, where it's used, that would be where I see its role.
Great, thank you.
Can I just build on that? I think that's certainly true. Nowadays, you can build a brand, you can start a brand, you can get it going without TV. It almost always gets to a point in its life stage, though, where TV is the thing that's going to catapult it to the next stage. And you see it, time and time again, whether it's Airbnb or Amazon or Google or Facebook, they just get to the point where they can't. TV would just be a really useful thing to do. And I think that is the key to this debate, actually. It's not a sort of either or. As Marco says, the stuff that TV has always done is hugely valuable, and it will remain being the central plank of marketers' program. And it's partly because it's got that killer combination of reach and time spent. It's just got that incredible scalability that is so useful. But of course, the idea of segmentation and targeting and the performance end, the closer you get to the other end of the purchase funnel, you need a different set of tools. As it turns out, TV is also developing those tools, and it's in relatively early days. But I think I'd probably say TV's got the best of both worlds in the current landscape. It continues to do what it's always done: create brands, make them famous, be the underpinning of marketers' campaigns, but also a whole series of additional targeting tools that allow you to really refine that campaign.
I mean, that said, I don't think I've ever seen a Facebook or Google TV ad. Maybe there are some, and I certainly wouldn't attribute the fame of their brands to TV campaigns. Not like a Coca-Cola or someone.
Google's the biggest spender on television.
Are they?
last year.
You need to watch a bit more telly.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
it. That's too much
Yeah.
BBC.
It's these millennials.
That's right. Which millennium?
Yeah, no, there are big spins. I see, you know, there are countless examples of online brands using TV to build themselves. I mean, compare the market. When I started in TV 6 years ago, they had two porter cabins in Peterborough, and they wanted to come onto telly, and they came on with some terrible ads. I don't know if you remember the two cars, and they moved to the Meerkats. But they're just about afloat for $6 billion 6 years later, and the main medium behind them has been TV. And that's just one example. There are plenty of other examples out there. That TV, when it accelerates the growth. You can always grow your brand somewhere else, but if you want to get quick impact and growth, TV is like none other.
Rocket fuel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so there's obviously the ability to fast track the fame of your brand on TV. And we are talking about linear TV. We're talking about TV not consumed, say, on a PC, on a mobile, on a tablet, but living room TV. And I think that there has been an increasing trend towards more targeting, through the set-top boxes, getting a finer point put on the traditional TV buying platform when you only had a handful of channels, and you could reach 80% of an audience with a single buy. So what learnings has linear or terrestrial TV made from what online has been doing for the last 20 years?
Wow.
Well, the first thing to say is I wouldn't make the distinction between TV and online, because TV is online, and online is sort of a delivery system for all sorts of media, and TV is there too. So, and I think it's viewing in that environment is a slightly different experience. It's more likely to be on your own, focusing on a specific device rather than with a group of people. So I think there are different opportunities and challenges in that environment. I think there's a lot of almost negative learnings. So in a way that TV has been able to, I suppose, take the opportunity from. So one of the things that TV has always done is really value the relationship with the viewer. That has been absolutely sacrosanct, because if they're not enjoying it, they're going to switch off. So you've got to make sure that the balance of advertising and content works for them. And I think that is, that has been how on-demand TV has developed. How many ads is it acceptable to be able to watch in that environment? So if you are set out to watch, a piece of your favourite programme on demand, how many ads are you willing to sit through beforehand? So I think not exploiting the viewer has been absolutely paramount for TV. So I think that's been a big lesson.
Yeah, I mean I absolutely back that up. I mean, one of the things that we saw very fast on is the pre-rolls. Do not overload your pre-rolls, because if you're going to watch a piece of content, you can be turned off so very, very quickly. And equally, one of the things that we've moved to is if you've been watching one show, you sit for another show, you don't have to go through another set of ads to watch it. So, as Lindsay said, our biggest learning is treat your viewer with respect. Get them to love your product, and then they'll buy into your advertising, and it'll be far more better for your advertisers as well. And that learning we need to actually push out in a wider forum across the internet and say, if you want the internet beyond television to be successful, treat your consumer with respect. And that means treat their data with respect, treat how you use the data with respect. Don't stalk them around the web. And thirdly, don't ruin the experience. And it's so obvious, and yet we seem to ignore it.
I think there's some great work there, isn't there? I mean, the IAB doing some really good stuff on...
I think the TV, the targeting discussion is, as regards TV in the living room, is, this isn't about the person that's got a cat or the person that's got a cat and a dog. Targeting can be broad targeting. And I think a lot of the work that's coming out of Sky and others is about saying, well, okay, being able just to target a circumference around the home in terms of inviting stores to to put ads for retailers, for, having a greater sense of man versus woman. Those sorts of things, those broad targeting are still important. And, and I think that the advances that we are seeing in TV, in the living room, in linear TV, that's where it's taken us. And I think it's encouraging. It will open the door, I think, to new advertisers who can see a different way of working with TV. And so I think we get a bit carried away with the over-targeting, hyper-targeting, because it's all these really, everyone thinks of these very detailed audiences that, we buy in digital. And I think actually experienced buyers of digital are slightly skeptical about even some of those very targeted things that we buy online. I think this is more about saying, look, here's how you used to be able to target on TV in the home, and now we're moving it X steps forward because we can do these 5 or 6 different things. Retargeting from the linear stream with the Sky products, things like this, they're all steps forward. And I think, that for me is, if there's learnings from what's happening, with the web display, VOD side of things, is just taking those extra steps to improve how we're, what ad we're showing to what person.
I think just building on that, one of the huge benefits of this hyper-targeting is targeting in very narrow geographical regions, and that's what is now possible through AdSmart. So it means that an advertiser who previously couldn't consider TV because they'd have to buy such a large area that it just wasn't relevant for them. If you've got a small car dealership in Portsmouth, or you've got a water park in the northeast, you only want the catchment of that particular service. And now you're able to do that on TV. So I think that's a great learning from online. It's not so much the issue of, I don't, of wastage, because actually for most brands, the thinking is the most effective campaigns target the broadest audience possible. But of course, if your product or service is irrelevant to 3/4 of the country, then that is genuine wastage. So now you've got that tight geographic targeting. Or it can just allow you to put your toe in the water and test it on a very, softly basis. And then when it's successful,
the idea
expand
of
it.
localized testing is a very interesting one.
Yeah.
So I think we might benefit in this discussion from having a clear definition. So let's call TV stuff that we all sit in a living room and we watch on a big screen, and we're watching it on traditional methods, and video advertising. It may be a TV show that you're watching online, but let's call it video, just for the sake of this, because I think that the notes that Vincent pulled together, he wanted to look at some of the differences and similarities and learnings that are crossing across those two. So TV is the stuff in the living room, lean back, and video online is maybe the more one-to-one stuff. Yeah. So one thing I've heard a lot about over the last few years, but I haven't yet seen materialize, is alternative ad formats on traditional TV. Say like a lower third that would maybe be a display ad that could roll up. So rather than a pre-roll, a graphical ad unit that would display via targeting through the set-top box. And that would allow maybe household level targeting or postal code level targeting at a more granular level, whereas the pre-rolls might be aimed at a broader audience. Is this something that is still sort of in people's minds, or is that a road that we're not really ever going to go down?
Are you talking on the linear, on
Correct.
TV? In
That's
the
right.
living room?
On the TV set.
On the TV set, yeah.
Correct.
I think, actually, I think there's a really good relationship between the viewer in the living room and what they receive on the set. It's one of respect, it's one understood, and it's bloody effective. It really, really works. And I think you tamper with that at your peril. Overlaying other ads, bringing up other formats in a linear scape. It is done a little bit in sport by Sky, and certainly in the horse racing, which we're going to take on from January 1. We may look at some new formats there, but those are very specialised areas. If I'm watching Victoria and a flipping ad pops up, in the middle of a great scene, which I then have to close down, I mean, you would kill the audience. And that's our learning. We don't want to do that.
There's a great example, which is a BBC example, but the principle is the same. It was in one of the previous series of Doctor Who, and they started trialling a little promo for the upcoming programme at the very, very end of the drama, and I think it was Graham Norton. So they had Graham Norton sort of dancing along the bottom of the screen at the end of Doctor Who, and oh my God, the country nearly collapsed with its sort of utter fury that it was being interrupted in that way. So, that's just to illustrate that point.
And I mean, I was doing, I can't remember what years it would have been now, early 2000s or something, where, interactive TV was the thing, and, we were trying to get people to press buttons, and it just, it doesn't work. People are lean back unless, so now people can be lean back. If they want to interact, they've got their second screen or multiple second screens. And, big debates about, Twitter's impact on TV and other social media in general. But I think if people want to interact, they've got that option. They don't necessarily want to do it on the TV. And I think still the TV is a little bit clunky. It's improved immeasurably from how it was, but the mechanisms behind it are still so much slower than your tablet. So I just don't think that is... Sport, I think, is an exception because I think sport is... You're leaning into sport. Yeah. I think it's one of those things, that's a lot more... There's a lot more opportunity and there's a lot more different angles and whatever, depending on...
And other live events, sport or music concerts or...
And we have we have a client, I won't name it because I never know what I'm allowed to name or not anymore, but we have a big advertiser who, was effectively retargeting on VOD from the Olympic stream based on what sport people were watching. So, there's some interesting ways that you can find to involve the audience.
I mean, we have tried it. We ran a long experimental period with Shazam, where you could Shazam the ads and it would give you more information. And the most we ever got was during the first time we ever did it. We had a continuity announcer said, stand by for a special ad, and we got 58,000 interactions. And that was in the middle of X Factor, which has 10 million viewers. So you can see there isn't really, in that direct sense, that relationship. Now, having said that, where you produce something that has a direct influence on the show. So in our case, I'm a Celebrity, X Factor, and Britain's Got Talent, where you have voting in-app. So we produce an X Factor app. There you have high levels of interaction with what's on the screen and what's on your second screen. So to give you a rather depressing statistic, more people voted in X Factor last year than voted in the general election, or rather they carried more votes. I mean, so... and that was all through that second screen experience. So it does happen, but it doesn't happen on the big screen. It happens on a secondary device.
Right.
I think the other thing worth saying is that all those additional creative, unusual ad formats are available in on-demand around TV. So because it's the online environment, you have that, extra overlays of display advertising, interactivity, choice of content that you, click through to. So all that is possible. But I think the key thing about it is the viewer has to be in control of it. So, in a pre-roll, you can choose to click on it for more information. You can choose to pause it, or it might offer you different forms of content. But, you're not inflicting, you're not forcing it on the viewer and interrupting their programming.
Great. There was a stat recently in the U.S. coming off the back of the second U.S. presidential debate, where it was viewed by 63 million people in the US while it was happening on the various TV channels. But it was viewed by 124 million people on Facebook and YouTube and other online outlets. Twofold more people watching it online or in bite-sized chunks. Does this say something about the way people are consuming TV or want to consume TV?
I think that was a classic measurement misnomer.
Exactly. Okay.
So, and it's the difference between TV viewers, which is transparent, measured. Everybody knows what that means, and they were not online viewers. They were stream started or views.
But maybe
of
that's how
that.
people consume content now, right?
But they're not equivalents, is the key thing.
Yeah,
So-
I think if you're watching, what you're measuring there is somebody who's watching. I don't know how long the debate went on for.
Way
let's
too
say
long.
half. Yeah, way too long. Let's say it was an hour's program. That is the average audience that are watching that hour's program that you're looking at there, versus somebody who might be scrolling down their Facebook page and seen an ad for the Republicans, for the sake of argument, which has a clip from the debate. And as Lindsay says, it's a completely different experience. I don't know what the measurement statistic is in the US, but some people are saying 3 seconds is a view. 3 seconds or 50% of your ad is the same as somebody spending half an hour with a piece of content. It's just incomparable. And I think we've got to be really, really careful where statistics are trumped up to be comparing like with like, when actually they're quite different.
But I think so. Those comparisons are probably not fair, and there needs to be more definition about those. I mean, I think the bigger discussion is: are people, watching more content through other devices? I think, and I think the simple answer to that is yes. To what extent? Just looking at the bar figures, you would say it's still a relatively small amount. But I think as with everything, there is a direction of travel, and the direction of travel, especially for the younger audiences, is to watch content on other devices and cord cutting and all that kind of stuff. So I think for me, as a broadcaster, as a distributor, or whatever it may be, it's about how are you planning for that future, because I think one of the slides you always see around TV audiences is you've got, let's say, the people watching the audiences in the living room. The millennials is the smallest bar, and then as we get older, it gets bigger and bigger in terms of how much television they're watching in the living room. I think the reality is that small bar isn't going to get as big as the big bar is, because they're now used to a different way of living. So I think over time, all the bars for linear TV are going to get smaller for all the audiences. And that's not a bad thing, because it's being picked up by all the other devices and all the other work that the broadcasters are doing on tablets and phones and so on. But you have to plan for that future. And I think, the stats around how many streams versus how many people and all that kind of stuff, they're a bit misleading. But there is a trend towards that. And as a buyer, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, as a buyer and as advertisers, they would expect broadcasters to be planning for that and coming up with solutions to help them navigate that shift in audience.
That was actually going to be my follow-up there is, whether the stats are wrong or right, I think that it's clear that lots of people are consuming content online instead of watching it in front of the television. Yeah. And there's a massive opportunity to address those eyeballs as a marketer online. So let's say that instead of doing a full TV-style 30-second pre-roll, you have something in your creative arsenal that runs before those 123 million people consume, whether it's a 3-minute view or whatever it is, so you can still get the message there. And a 15, 20-second ad that you're viewing on YouTube or wherever you're watching this content has the power to convey sight, sound, motion, and an emotional connection just as it can on television. So I would wonder, so what can people be doing? What can I sort of wish there was an actual marketer on the stage, because I'd love to hear what I know, right? What they were thinking. But how are you preparing for this world? Because I think that, even if those numbers are right or wrong, I think directionally, to Marco's point, there is a shift there. And how are we getting ready for this? And then the second part of this will be, is that an addressable market through programmatic buying?
I think the first question you've got to ask is it the right place to advertise? So if you have got somebody watching let's say a 3-second clip of something, is that an advertising opportunity? Just because it's got eyeballs doesn't mean that it's an effective advertising opportunity. And we're forgetting the first question is, does it work? Is it what the consumer wants? Is it right? I mean, look, give you a ridiculous statistic. There are 18 million urinals in the UK. It doesn't make urinal advertising the best advertising in the world, does it? And you spend a lot longer there than you do watching.
Mr. Scooterman does well.
Well, possibly, yeah. But I think one has to start in a different place. What is the right advertising? Is it the right place to advertise it? Just because it has eyeballs, is that a good place? If you answer those questions, then you have to start finding the right route to advertising and what works creatively. Now, we haven't found that. I'm not talking about we ITV or we television. We as an industry haven't found that yet. And I'm not purporting to say I have the answer on the stage now, because I don't. But we've got to start in a different place, other than just saying, wow, there are loads of people over here, let's advertise to them. Because that's wrong, and it doesn't work. Well, it does work, but it works at 0.0001%, and then the 99.9% people dislike you, disagree you, or even worse, just ignore you.
I would also say we sort of need to move out of the either or, the audience is moving online is this sort of big misnomer that's often stated. So we need to move out of the either or and into the and. Because if a marketer was sitting here, what they would probably say is their biggest challenge is what combination of media do we use, how to integrate it to the best effect, what roles should we have for the different media, how do we measure them, how do we measure the sort of integrated impact of those. And I think that is the biggest challenge. So rather than saying, well, there's all these eyeballs online, so let's, the job that we used to expect TV to do, let's make that do. No, it's about combinations. So, all the data would say that the best and most effective campaigns have usually TV as their brand medium and some form of online advertising is their activation medium. That's the sort of optimum combination. So how do you get the best out of that combination? And that's an ongoing challenge.
You raise a good point. I think so what I was saying earlier about the broadcasters preparing for that shift is not in the sense of we've got to do something else over here. It's about how they combine the linear TV with the VOD viewership, and obviously some of the work Sky's doing is doing that with the retargeting off the linear stream and so on. There's going to be loads of other things, I'm sure, but I think after that, then you're into the, and I'm sorry, then we get into some of the programmatic jargon stuff, but then after that, the next logical step is, well, how do I connect that TV stuff to all the other things I'm doing? And as advertisers, and they are every day embracing more and more data management platforms, bringing their own data into their advertising as a whole, how can we try and, how can TV be part of that discussion? It may or may not happen. It may be that we end up with okay, now we have a Google and a Facebook and a Sky, and we just have to live with that. But equally, if there's an opportunity to bring the advertiser data and combine it with all of their media properties, TV being the biggest probably still, that's something we should think about because they will want to do that. Maybe not tomorrow, but they will want to do that at some point.
But I think the problem that we have there currently is that everybody has their own data, and there are some barriers, legal barriers to sharing that data, certainly, but there are also some financial barriers. And to be absolutely honest with you, every media agency out there has their own data, and they want to use that. And currently, the general view, not everybody's view, is that agencies are less willing to work with other people's data than their own data because they don't make as much money out of it. And that got to be a challenge to us, which is why, so at the beginning of this, actually, the utopia is, and I'm not sure that utopia will ever be reached, is to have an independent body that has all this data there, that is funded independently, is transparent, much like Barb.
Yeah, but that's audience viewing data. I'm not even talking about agency data. What advertisers are doing now, and I would say every single one of our biggest global clients and many local ones have all done, not with us, they've often done deals with data management platforms, the usual Adobes and Oracles of the world, and they're bringing their data, their customer data into that.
Data, yeah.
What they want to do is connect that with the stuff that's out there, and they want to try, where possible, in an ideal world, they go, right, here's my customer, I'm going to show him a TV ad here, and a VOD ad there, and a display ad there, and a mobile ad there. Obviously overly simplified, but that's what they'd like to do. It's got nothing to do with agency data or anything else. And so that is that again, as we talk about directions of travel, that is happening. I see it every day in my job. and advertisers are doing it more and more. And I think, so that is the next, so it's linear TV to VOD, and then it's TV as a whole with other stuff, and we'll see where that goes. But there's certainly more progress than ever before in the TV space in that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear a lot, like what you're saying echoed all the time when I do talk to client buyers. They want to be using their first-party data, and they want to be using it cleverly, and they're hiring really clever people to make use of that data. They can't do much with that data in a traditional TV environment. It's very hard to activate a DMP segment on a TV buy, obviously. And there used to be an old adage of no one ever got fired for buying TV. Is someone ever going to get fired for just buying TV because there's no targeting?
Well, there is targeting, number one, and it's been proven.
First-party DMP targeting.
Yeah. Look, my worry, is that the right way? The question is that the right way to buy TV? You've got an experience which has been incredibly successful at building brands for 60 years odd now on television. If it improves that experience or improves the effectiveness of advertising, then fine, we should do it. But we need to find out whether it does and not pile headlong into, let's target everything on telly, because I tell you what, you might well kill the golden goose. If you divide everything into 1,000 different segments, you won't get, which is what Marco talked about, people saying, did you see that? Did I see that? Which is the most powerful moment, positive reaffirmation from people around you on products and services is the most powerful way to get your brand across. And I worry if you segment it by 1,000 different segments on linear TV, you start losing the real essence of what is effective.
Is it still the golden goose?
Oh, massively.
Oh, yeah.
So every large-scale independent study that you look at TV always comes out on top, not just for overall effectiveness, because it's sort of big scale, delivering volume returns, but also in efficiency. So as ROI, which is the efficiency measure, it also does fantastically on that, which is feels like it might be slightly counterintuitive. But whether it's PwC or Ubiquity or the IPA data bank, all of it backs up the same data. And part of the reason is because of the catalytic effect it has on other media. So it's not just in its own right as this great big brand building medium. It's also on its impact on that highly targeted precision, online campaign that you're talking about. So both, as a direct impact on the impact there, but also indirectly too. So indirectly on other.
So why is digital now a larger portion of marketing spend in the UK than television?
Well, digital is has become a meaningless term. All television is digital. It is the most
yes, but
medium.
it's not counted in those numbers, right?
Yeah, it is. No, very quickly. It is counted in those numbers because ITVs, Channel 4s, Sky's, players are all counting those numbers, and a significant proportion of our revenue now comes, in your sense, digitally. So it is counted. But
it's also, when you say digital, it means it's all online media. So it means, search, which is a, fantastic tool, but it's completely different from TV. It's not going to replace TV. It's fantastic, point of sale, bit of point of sale, really. It's completely different from email marketing, from, online video display, from, static display, digital encompasses a whole range of different media that you're putting into a huge pot and then comparing it with one. So I think it's not a great comparison.
But TV is brand, TV is cable, TV is spot. It's combining a whole bunch of methods of buying TV as well.
But I think there's also there's a broader thing which is a big challenge, which is the whole industry is being seduced by short-termism and countability. And I think that's what everybody's thinking, we've got loads of data, we need to use it. It's easy to count. And just because something is easy to count doesn't make it the most effective thing to do. One of the challenges with TV is, it doesn't always have, that real-time, reams of data immediately afterwards that you can, track the effect analytically. So it's inconvenient. That doesn't make it less effective. And so, I think that is the big danger for for TV. You've got to, marketers need to understand that, just don't go for convenience, go for effectiveness.
And I think it's just that work. I think for me, it's the work around the younger generations and how they are. So, TV works. It's something we hear about, and I fully support. It works, but I don't know. What I don't know is how much that is broken down into all its different segments. Right? It works for the big FMCG. It works for cars. It works for and so on. But the question is, it works because we've got this spectrum where the hard-to-reach audiences are the small bar, and everyone else is much, much bigger. I guess the question is, in 20 years, if that small bar is still small, it's just making sure there's an answer to that. I'm not saying there is it is or it isn't working, because I haven't seen the specific research. But I do think there is a danger that TV can rest on its laurels, because at the moment the small bar is a small bar, and all the big advertisers are like, yeah, it works because I get all this stuff in, but they've had 50 years to practice it. The young audiences at the bottom, the hard to reach one, we've had less practice on, and I think that's where digital's problems lie, is that we've been around for 15 years or so. We haven't had enough practice on demonstrating it's working.
Well, just to build on that, on young people, because there's some important things to understand about young people's viewing. Live TV is the most popular form of video for young people. 16 to 24s, of their total video time, they spend 47% of that watching live TV. If you take all TV, including stuff recorded on the planner and on demand, it's just under 60% of their total video viewing. YouTube is 10%. So that, it's not like... Young people are not a hard-to-reach audience in TV. They are watching lots of it, and it has incredibly high reach. Secondly, if you look at the behaviour of millennials as they age and move through that lifestyle, because millennials is a pretty broad group, younger ones watch more online video and on demand. As they age, as they get older and have children, their linear TV viewing goes up, their online video viewing goes down. It's an absolute classic pattern. So I think I agree with Marco in that I don't think their peak will probably be of linear TV viewing on the TV set will be as high as it was as they age. But, they're the biggest consumers of telly in other forms. They're the most enthusiastic adopters of watching, on demand on other devices. And it's probably, Barb calculated, this is probably about 14% of their viewing that just isn't captured at the moment, of their TV viewing, because it's being on those other devices.
I mean, some of our programs, say Love Island, which is a typical 16 to 24-year-old program, we have more viewing in an online environment than we do linear TV. And it's just that, to say that TV is not moving with the times, we're providing TV wherever, however you want it. You can cut and dice it, you can watch short form, you can watch long form, you can watch any program anywhere. It travels around with you. Your phone is a television. And everybody said, well, the internet's going to eat the TV. Well, actually, it's a TV that's eaten the internet. It is the internet. It is still the most prevalent form of consumption of video on the internet.
And then I think the other thing we've got to solve as an industry is young people are the least tolerant of advertising in the online space. So, if you believe the YouGov figures, 50% of them have installed, they're more likely to install an ad blocker, whether it's 50% or 38% or whatever it is. And I think that's what we've got to... So I think the work that the IAB is doing in trying to reduce the amount of, intrusive ad formats is really, really important. But I think, we've got to make online advertising more acceptable than it currently is to young people.
Yeah. Great. Well, we are pretty much out of time. One question that Vincent really wanted to hear you guys reflect on was what TV would look like in 2025. But I think what you've just done is almost lay out a roadmap of what it might look like in terms of audience, in terms of how it's being consumed, where it's being consumed. And I think, we can probably think about where you guys see things going and how marketers can benefit from that. But thank you very much, everyone. Marco, Lindsay, Simon, great panel.
Cheers.
Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.